Obliged to give my elevator speech as well. I work for a company called Widen. We're a content technology software company. We make tools like digital asset management, workflow management tools, which are my product, and then web to print tools. The topic we're going to talk about today is the people are the cornerstone of your team. And while I'm not in a creative role, I have been in a software development role, and I think there are a lot of parallels with how creative teams are built, recruited for, and kind of managed, and creative teams. And I've seen that over the past 2 years of kind of my exploration in the creative field. So hopefully we can find out some interesting details from our panelists about how do you build and manage a great creative team. So I'll bring up Danny Rickard and Molly Gallagher. So Danny Rickard is the Director of Creative Operations for an in-house studio at one of TeamPeople's on-site managed contracts in the New York City area. And Molly is the Senior Director of Creative Services at Fabletics. She has over 15 years of experience overseeing photo and film production and creative operations. So I think it just makes sense to start off with how you recruit a good creative team. So what skills or traits or abilities do you really look for when you're trying to build a team out that would be unusual or might surprise us?
I like to start with personality. I want to make sure that they are fit with the team that we're recruiting for. And I ask them usually to talk about their journey as one of my first questions for the candidate, because I want to kind of hear who they are, where they came from, where their passions are, and it helps them relax them a little bit before the more usual questions in an interview starts coming.
All right. How about you?
Agreed. I think it's really important to find someone who's going to be a good cultural fit for not only the company but the team. And I also always ask someone who I'm interviewing how much familiarity they have with our brand, because I think it's important to see that they're coming into an interview with some level of knowledge and excitement for the conversations that we're having and potentially bringing them in.
You both mentioned culture, alluded to culture. What does a team culture mean to each of you? Let's start with you, Molly.
For us, I think a team culture, being a team, you're working together every day. You're spending the majority of your time with one another. So do you have a personality that fits in with the rest of the group? Do you come from a place of wanting to do well and not just clock in your hours? I want someone who's going to be there, who's going to put in the time to do quality work, who is not afraid to raise their hand if they do feel like they have a lot on their plate, but also come at it from a place of being reasonable and not so much whining, because creatives like to whine. But yeah, I would say that in terms of having someone be that cultural fit, it's really, do they work well with the team? Do they want to be a part of the team, or are they a loner? Because our culture is not fit for loners. So it's really, it's a lot of teamwork.
Yeah, totally. And also, it's the beliefs that the group has on how to solve problems, or how to handle heavy workloads. And one of the questions, that I like to ask with candidates is, how do you handle tough, challenging situations? Because that answer usually lets you know a lot about the candidate of how of the both the situations they've been in, and you know how they have found the solution or who they've gone to find the solution. Will allow you to better understand who they are as a person and if that fit will be good within your current team.
Sure. Is there anything you're looking specifically for in those answers?
Yeah, it's like I like to hear when people approach it from a team aspect and not like blame people or point fingers, because then it just like crumbles when you know, or when people never admit fault. It's always someone else's fault as to why a project went off the rails or the client didn't like the project. I'm huge on a team, and when you have 2 or more people working towards the same goal, anything's possible, I feel. And when you have 2 or more people working towards different goals, whether that be blaming someone else, then it just slows everything down and just creates some internal warfare, which is just terrible. But yeah.
All right.
That's what I see.
How do you help shape the culture of your team? So we heard how you recruit people for that culture, but what is your role in shaping that culture?
You can go, yeah. I would say leading the way you believe, showing people what you want out of them through, you know, generating conversations, through caring about the projects, caring about the people, because, you know, people want to be noticed and people's work want to be noticed. And so I think when you treat people as people and not as employees only, they really love to get up and come to work. And you know that's kind of how you start generating respect from your team, and not always going to them with a problem, but kind of asking them, you know, how their day was or what you do this weekend, or you know, genuinely asking them too, not just like how was your day, then look away. But there has to be some spirit behind it. And you know, and it just kind of grows into something that you hope it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have the person who's like, yeah, I know you don't care how my weekend went. I don't care how your weekend went either. So can I just go to work and go home? But you know, I always find those people challenges. I'm like, I'm gonna turn you around. Like I'm gonna make you a good person inside. And it works sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. But
Yeah, I think a lot of that is leading by example. So if you want to have a team that is, you know, a culture that is fostered in teamwork, you really need to start with yourself and kind of generate that conversation amongst everyone, have those genuine conversations. They're people too. They have lives outside of the office. They have problems, you know, that are personal, and sometimes they want to share them and sometimes they don't. But knowing that there's an open door for them, there's a forum for them, a person to speak to if they need it. I think that goes a long way. And another thing that we were talking about in our breakout session, which you touched on, was showing off their work. They're very proud of it, and it's really important to allow other people to see it. You know, we deliver multiple projects every day, but you know, not all of the people who are on the receiving end of those projects know specifically who worked on it. So sometimes calling it out in an approval meeting or something really goes a long way, and it gets back to them, and it makes them feel proud.
Yeah, cool. So to that end, do you have any rituals or habits that you kind of facilitate as part of a leader to kind of motivate your employees like that, like showing your work? Are there other things that you like to have your team members do?
Yeah, I mean, we have quarterly highlights, going back to showing your work. I don't know if that's a ritual, but it really excites people. You know, and it was funny because when we started doing quarterly highlights, we started putting the names of the people on the projects, and then we did that for a few months and then realized that that's kind of individualizing their projects. So we just put the team that created the project, which then brought a little more pride to them. It was interesting psychology experiment. Didn't mean to be a psychology experiment, just kind of ended up that way. Yeah, that's a lot of it. And then, in between those quarters, we give awards out, and just little spot awards or monthly awards, just so people can recognize the work of others. And sometimes, in an in-house agency, you may not even know who this person is getting the award, but at least it gets their name out there, which kind of helps going back to the culture.
I think for us too, we also just recently implemented a monthly postmortem. So the creative team sits down with the marketing team, and we review the performance of all of the assets that were created over the course of the past month. So they're really hungry for that feedback. They want to know how their designs are performing, if their emails are engaging, if people are clicking through. And so that information I found that they were really hungry for, and they really enjoy those conversations. So that's something that moving forward I think will be more of a ritual and part of our process. And also I think we're trying to do monthly kind of, either if it's an offsite or some kind of inspirational meeting where we take 2 to 3 hours on a Friday and we kind of, have a conversation about something that's inspiring to them. Maybe they're watching a film that's, known, really well known, or we're going to a print production company, anything that might be a learning experience or something that will generate inspiration for them.
And that's so cool as well, because then the team gets to know each other outside of what they see every day. And that's where you start to see some cool fire of similarities, and then it brings the team outside of work. It just brings the people together.
Right.
Yeah, it's fun. That's cool.
Yeah. We have pretty diverse teams. We have UX designers. One of them is here. We have developers and whatnot in each of our teams, and we have I think it's a small budget, but each team gets $250 every quarter to just do whatever they want with it. So no one is responsible for planning the outings, but then it just develops a different form of teamwork when you're hanging out, doing something outside of work. Doesn't have to be a happy hour. We went and played one of those, what is it, the escape room type things as a team, and that was great bonding. Yeah. What are 3 roles that you think every team has to have to be successful?
Operations.
Absolutely agree with that.
Creative, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Are there?
you need a designer, because without a designer, you don't have, the work being created or made. I agree. Operations. I mean, copy is really important. You need someone writing the words that are going onto these projects. So I think without those 3 roles, you really don't have. You're not starting anywhere. So.
Where does something like someone who's very analytical versus someone who's just pie in the sky thinker, what is the mix of that type of people on your team? What's the best ratio, or is there a best ratio?
We have a lot less analytical people, which is key. It's just me. And I've learned over the years to be less analytical in meetings, and just to let the creatives talk, because they amaze me every day. And I'm always really jealous of them, and so I just kind of let them, where these ideas come from. I'm like, man, I didn't even think about that. And so I don't at all want to pour any water or douse it at all. I want to keep that flame alive, and especially in front of others. And then kind of when it gets to, okay, how do we do it? That's kind of, if it is way out there, kind of help to respectfully bring it down to a point where we can execute on it in the time that we have and the budget we have. But let it fly for a few hours or days. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I always like to let them think really big before I pull them back and tell them they don't have the money to do what they want to do or the budget for a photo shoot that they want to shoot in Barcelona or something. But yeah, let them be creative. Let them have their big thoughts. That's part of what keeps them inspired and motivated and leads to great ideas, that you can accomplish within the parameters of the project. I think it's also really important to allow them the opportunity to have a voice in terms of what it is that they see for a particular project. Let that collaborative nature grow and have those conversations.
So how do you take the big dreams and winnow that down without just crushing spirits?
Very carefully.
Yeah, and slowly.
Some tactics, take one of their ideas, one of the many that they have, right? And like, oh, I loved this idea. And then, what if we do this with it? It just goes back to psychology and kind of like, we're still taking the idea that you had, but we're kind of, don't you want to see this out there type conversation to have with them.
Sure.
And I never try to be like, oh, I thought about this, why don't we do this? Because then they're like, oh, you're an analytical person, you can't think about anything creative. And so I'm like, right, I know. So it has to be your idea, which helps.
Yeah, I think also it has to have a basis in reality, and most of them are reasonable when you kind of sit them down and say, this is what is actually being asked for, and this is what you're talking about doing. It's kind of a little out of control. So let's pull it back a little bit, but keep it in the realm of what you're thinking, because there's no reason we can't accomplish this concept or project the way that you want to and still, deliver something that you're proud of. So I think letting them see that they will love what they've done at the end, even though it's not necessarily what they want, how it's not going to be approached with the approach that they want to take.
And sometimes they appreciate the pulling back down, like, no, here's the objective right here. And there are a lot of times like, oh yeah, thanks, I need that.
Yeah.
So it's not always, good and bad. Sure. It's supporting the person on your team to help focus them, which is sometimes welcomed with open arms. Sometimes not, but sometimes it is.
How about your team's satisfaction? How do you gauge that? Do you have ways to measure your team's satisfaction, happiness?
We have a really amazing tool at our company. It's called 15-5. It's basically a survey that should take, it's like 15 questions that should take 5 minutes to fill out. Or I think it's the other way around, actually. But we're very passionate about it, and we enforce everyone to fill it out. The comments that you make in it can go all the way up to our CEO, and he's very actively engaged in reading the comments and seeing the feedback, which is really helpful. And the first question that you're asked to fill out every week is, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your workload? And then, some of the questions that are asked are, how can I be a better leader for you? What projects really motivated you this week that you're working on? So it's been a really valuable tool to gauge open, honest feedback from our team in terms of how they're feeling, what they're working on, what they like working on, what they don't like working on. And that's happening all through a program, but obviously there's also, that in-person communication as well. I like to have team touch bases once a week. I have touch bases individually with the people that I manage. So I think that tool online has really been amazing, and I've never used it in any other company I've been at. So I highly recommend it if anyone's looking for something like that. But I think it doesn't replace the in-person communication that you need to have.
Right. That's cool. I've seen that company, and it's actually, I want to look more into it now. But we do polls, but kind of our own polls, which I think could be more valuable and more specific. But we do 2 polls a year. We call them "What's on Your Mind." It's dangerous sometimes, but we talked about it before we rolled out the first one. Is like, do we really want to know what's on people's minds? And we're like, yeah, we do. Like, I was like, yeah, and that means we have to answer to it. I'm like, right, we want to keep this team alive, and that's one of the most important, I think, things is to have quick action when you send out a poll, to ensure that people are being listened to. As opposed to, look, we sent out a poll, aren't we? Awesome. And then there isn't any feedback from there. And then if you don't put action towards it, that next poll will be very invaluable because people will think that you don't care. So you have to be ready to put some things into action and to be very transparent that you received these types of requests or, not really gripes, but gripes, and here's how we're going to address them, and also knowing that we can't change everything, can't satisfy everyone, but we'll try our best to satisfy the group.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that quick feedback is really important, or the quick action, because a word that we've said a few times here today is trust, and I think it goes back to the level of trust that it creates with the employees and knowing that they're being heard. So.
Are the results of either of your two the polls or the 5 for 15?
15.5.
15.5. Are they made public to the entire company?
No, they're not.
Okay.
They can be. Part of the 15.5, there's also a section where you can give high fives to
Nice.
people, and you're encouraged to do so. So those high fives can be seen publicly to the company, and we actually have a few screens throughout the building that, there's a feed of 15.5s where they're going up all day.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah, ours are, we'll take, maybe 3 common themes and let people know, here's the feedback that we heard, and here's what we're doing to help the situations. Everything's confidential, there's no names, which I'm sure is similar to yours. We will sometimes have people like, well, mine's not the top 3. It's like, well, and then, we always open it up to like, if you have anything else on your mind the next week or the next month, whatever, you can go see your manager. And same, we have one-on-ones in between those polls to generate some more conversation. So
Sure.
that ongoing conversation is the key.
What about the opposite? What are some warning signs that you've seen that you need to dive in before things kind of spiral?
Pointing fingers, when people start pointing fingers, you might tell it's I can't stand that. When something goes wrong, finding a solution right away instead of blaming someone or trying to figure out who made it go wrong. That's when you have to prioritize. You're like, I want to first fix the situation, ensure the client is satisfied, and then we'll talk about how we're going to avoid it in the future versus who did it. Is one of the things.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think also just if you're sensing someone's not happy, try to have the conversation with them. That in-person communication can really go a long way. But to your point, that blaming and pointing fingers can trickle down or across the rest of the team, and you want to avoid that the minute you see it.
Okay. I don't know how we're doing for time. We're good?
So if we have any questions,
Could you please speak to your structure a little bit, how your creative teams are structured?
Yeah, you want to go?
Sure. So we have a creative director who oversees the entire creative team. And then I oversee the photo studio operations. We have an internal studio. And I oversee project management and photo production. So our creative team specifically is made up of an associate creative director and a senior graphic designer, and 2 junior graphic designers. We have a copy team of a few people, but that's actually under the marketing umbrella. We're under the marketing umbrella too, but they're separate from creative, which is new to me because everywhere I've worked, it's been copy and creative together. So it works, it's fine, it's not an issue, but that's how we're structured.
Yeah, pretty similar. CD up top with copywriters, video producers, photographers, graphic designers, motion graphic designers, and then from there we have a pretty small internal team, and then we're supported by freelancers or with freelancers. So pretty similar between the two.
Yeah, we have video as well. Don't know why I forgot that.
Other questions?
Hello. I was just curious about what if you guys have any processes or any ideas around retention of talent, because that seems to be an issue, especially in markets like New York, San Francisco, LA, where there's more opportunity. Retaining good talent is sometimes a challenge. So I know you talked about some of the feedback and some of the opportunities for them to make comments and all that stuff, but is there anything else that you guys implement or deploy or whatever you want to call it in your businesses for the purposes of retention specifically?
I have found, I've worked in groups that have money for awards, and I've worked in groups that don't have money for awards, and it kind of, the one consistency that I've seen that works is just treating them like people and understanding that they have problems just like everyone else, and they may bring those problems into the office, and that life, I don't really see a work-life balance like black and white. Like, this is all life. And so when people feel like that's understood, and they will have, a bad day because something happened in the morning, or they're selling a house and buying a house, which is madly stressful, and for you to understand that it's creating that belief system and that culture that it's okay to be stressed out with a personal problem at work, and to not abuse them as far as their time goes, through any, guilt tactics or anything. Except, if there's deadlines and they have something to get to, it's like, respect that and find, it's our jobs to find a different way to allow them to have a good life, and for us to find a way to deliver a project, so they can go home and be rested and be with their family or be with their friends or whatever. I have just seen that work for me, and it's not easy, but it's really important.
I totally agree with you. I think also just making sure that the work is evenly allocated goes a long way. I think you get a lot of frustrated people who either don't have enough to do and are seeing other people get better, bigger projects. And then the people who are getting the better, bigger projects, maybe they have too much work on their plate. I don't know that there's, a magic answer in terms of retention methods, just because of life and what happens and other opportunities that come up. But I think, fostering a healthy work environment where the employees know that they're cared about as a person and not just a worker, is really where you have to start with that.
Any other questions?
I would also say to, fuel their development at all times. There are some people who feel that they need to retain this talent at whatever cost. And I think, a true creative ops leader helps that talent go places, whether it's with you or not. And how awesome that feeling is when you take someone who started out with you, and then you can give them and kind of let them spread their wings elsewhere, and your paths may meet 10 years down the road. But I think having a sense of development, that somebody cares about them and their career, also helps the situation.
Yeah, I think it's important when they feel that they've been set up for success from the beginning, and that they've been given the proper tools to work with. So part of what you were saying, I also think, you have to make sure that they are using the most up-to-date technology and that they have the software and the systems in place that they need to be doing the work that, will eventually allow them to grow and grow in their career.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to end the morning on this spirit of celebrating and supporting humanity. So a big thank you to, all right?
More.
Yes, I know.